Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. Today we're going to be talking about custom forms on Wix again, and I'm going to be talking about three different approaches to creating custom forms. One will be using only datasets, so that'll be no code at all, and then we're going to be talking about a combination between datasets and Velo Code, and finally we're going to talk about how to completely program your form using Velo Code. At the very end, I'm going to share some of what I think are best practices for creating a custom form in terms of user experience. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, let's get started. So first of all, what is the difference between a custom form and a Wix form? So a Wix form would be what you're adding to your site. If you go to Add Elements and you go down here to Contact and Forms, and you just plop one of these forms out on your website, and this comes pre-built. It comes inside of this box that says Wix Forms, and you can still add and remove fields and everything from like validation, success message, which is all stuff that we're going to talk about soon. That's all set up for you within the form. The disadvantage of this is that you have very little control over the form. So you might also be limited in terms of which inputs you can use and stuff like that. And you're also limited in terms of how you collect the data, what the field names will be inside of the data collection that they're using, any manipulations that you want to do to the data before submitting them to the database, setting up different kind of custom validations, and just a custom feel for your form. So that will be somewhat limited in terms of Wix forms in general. 99% of the time, when I'm building a website, I will use a custom form. I'll really only use Wix forms for like the most basic contact us example where you really know, okay, I just need first name, last name, email, the simplest form in the world, because it allows you to kind of to streamline these things and everything is set up and it's simple. But except for that, like one case, typically anything that I set up on a website will be a custom form. And a custom form is where you set up the inputs yourself and you set up the process of submitting the data to a collection by yourself. So let's hop in and explore that a little bit. So in order to start setting a custom form, and I do have another video on this that I published a while back, but I think it's a good time for a refresher because I know we have a lot of new audience now that we didn't have a few months ago. And in order to add a input to your site for a custom form, you actually need to turn on dev mode. So if you open up kind of here your list of elements, you'll notice, wait, there's no inputs here. How do I create a custom form? So actually, in order to do that, you're going to need to turn on dev mode. Okay. And once you have dev mode on, so obviously we have our code editor open and everything. And you'll also see here that if I go into add elements, then boom, here I have inputs. Okay, so Wix is assuming that if you don't really know how to use dev mode, then you don't deserve inputs. So that's just one thing to notice. Even though technically you could create a custom form that would submit without using code. So that's the first thing that I'm going to show you how to do. And I'm just going to add an input here. So let's say this is add your name. And I'm going to add one more input. And let's change this to email input. So here you can choose your different types of input. So email, and this means that it'll look for validation that has to do with email. Validation basically means to check that the value that's in your input is what you're actually trying to collect or is a similar format to what you're trying to collect. So for an email, that would be something and then the @ symbol and then something dot something. Okay, so that's kind of the format that it'll be looking for. And here I can just change this placeholder text, let's say to email. Okay, and the last thing that we're going to need in order to basically complete our form would be some kind of button to submit. So I'm going to create a button here, and this button will be our submit button. So that would be everything in terms of building out our form. We're going to make a slightly more complex form soon, but I just want to show you some of the basics first. So this is name and email, and then we're going to need to store this data in the database when it's submitted. So I'm going to create a new collection. I'll just call this collection form. And basically we need to add fields that will correspond to what we're collecting in our form. So I'm going to add one field and I'm going to call it full name. I'm going to add another field and I'm going to call this email. And now that I have these two fields, I can actually get rid of this title field. So I'm just going to change the full name to the primary field and get rid of the title here. Great. So now that we have this set up, one last thing that you're going to want to check is your permissions of your collection. So if you go here to permissions and privacy, you can see here that now it's set so that anyone can view content, but only admin can add, delete, or update content. So if we're building a form on our site using the method that I'm about to show you, a custom form, you're going to have to allow whoever you want to submit to the form. So if this form is only for site members, then you can go ahead here and select site member, and then only site members will be able to fill out your form. When I say fill out, I mean actually submit it, the data to the database. If you want it to be for anyone, any site visitor, just random people visiting your site, let's say it's a contact me form or a subscription form, something like that, then you'll want to set it to anyone. And that's what I'm going to do here. And in terms of view content, so you can actually set that to admin. Okay. And here you can see the type of content is form submissions. And it kind of figures out, I think, based on what I selected here. Is that possible? I didn't notice if this changed as I was changing these. But yeah, so anyone can add content, and only the admin can actually view the content, delete it, or update it. So this is good for some kind of forms. And if you're creating a form, which is, let's say, um, user information that like a profile, and you want them to be able to also update that profile or delete that profile, then you're also going to want to change these permissions and change them, let's say, to site member author. So whoever created that entry can also delete it, or they can also update it. Okay, so that would be good for a form that's more like a, a profile, user information, something that they're going to be changing or should have the right to delete over time. We're going to create more of like a contact me or just a general informational form. So I'm just going to leave everything here at admin and this at anyone. And we're going to go ahead later and we're going to switch this to admin when I show you some of the other ways that we can submit a form. So let's go ahead and click save. And yeah, so now we have our database set up. And in order to submit this form, again, using no code at all, we are going to need to add a content manager element, add content element, and data set. Okay. And data set is basically, again, I have videos specifically about data sets. It's just a way to connect between a collection and elements on your site. And this connection can be either to display data, but it could also be to collect data. And in order to collect data here, we're going to have to go into settings, and then we're going to choose our collection. So I'm going to choose the form collection. And it just automatically gives it a name, data set, form data set, and we need to change the mode. Okay, so now it's on read only, which would be for displaying content. And now we have two choices. We could either choose write only. So that's for a form, like a contact form, somebody's only submitting data. And read and write would be a good choice if we are doing like a profile kind of form where somebody's also update the data. And what that would do, it would display here inside the form the current data in the database. And then if the person changed it and saved it, then it would alter the database. This is slightly more complex, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose write only for now. Okay, and this all kind of grays out here because we're not really fetching data and we're not displaying data, so all this stuff is not really so relevant. And now all we have to do is connect our elements to our form. So I'm going to go ahead and connect this form data set, and the value will connect to full name. If you're kind of connecting your form, and as you're connecting, you realize, oh shoot, I forgot to add something in the database, you can always go ahead and add a new field directly from here. And then we're going to connect the email as well. And then we are going to connect the submit button, and the click action connects to submit. And we can add a success message. So success message will basically be what shows if we have a successful submission to the database, so our form works. And we can also add a failure message. So I like to call it an error message. So what happens if there's an error? So we'll have that message. And let's see what else we can connect here, if there's anything else we want to connect. Okay, so you can also, okay, when successful, navigate to. So let's say I want, after somebody submits the form, take them to some other page on my website. Okay, so I could do that as well. And label connects to if I want the label of my button to be connected to a database field. At the moment, I just wanted to say submit. Okay, so that's everything in terms of setting up kind of a custom form using a data set. Okay, so there was no code involved here at the moment. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hit publish on this. Let's go and view the site. Okay, so I'm going to say Dylan, and the email is going to be bo@gmail.com. And I'm going to go ahead and hit submit, and your content has been submitted. Okay, so there was no error over here. And if we go and check out our collection, then we can see, no, not create collection, but go collections, form, Bob Dylan, bobo@gmail.com. Okay, so that's the basics. There are a few other things that we can do, such as deciding if fields are required or not. So here you can see we have validations. So I can say, okay, this field is required. This field is also required because I need both the name and the email. And I can also add some kind of pattern validation. So let's say for the name, I can go over here and click Add Pattern Validation, and this uses something called a regex, which is basically a line of code-ish that basically is a way to tell the computer what kind of characters or string patterns you are looking for in your validation. I think that even if you know how to code in JavaScript, um, I think you could either spend your entire life learning how to code everything except for regex, or learn how to code regex, because it's just really, I find it just a very complicated list of rules. And you can just go to ChatGPT or go to Google, regex for X and X and X, like explain your validation that you want to do in words and get some kind of regex from there. Because yeah, I mean, if you can do regex, then really kudos to you. Leave a comment and show off the fact that you can write regex. So that's over here. And we're going to talk about other options for validation and stuff. But I just want to show you what would happen, the error message formats. You can have either tooltip or inline. So let me just show you what these would look like. So if I refresh my site here, and I try and submit the form like this, so you see it says an error occurred because both of these are required fields. And they kind of highlight using kind of a red frame, okay, just to indicate that these fields have not been filled out, and they should be. And if we go ahead and we switch this to inline, I'm going to hit publish and go ahead and hit refresh and click submit, then that didn't change. um, so yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I know that on Editor X this does work. On Editor X this does work. This might only work if we're doing the custom validation, or maybe if I only add error, maybe only if there's pattern validation. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go and I'm going to create a regex first for just to test this out. And when this inline versus tooltip error message fills out, because apparently the plain old just required doesn't fire that off. So let's experiment with that. So here I am with the loyal chat GPT, and we're going to create a regex for our validation of our name field. And the validation that I want to do is I want to make sure that somebody is inputting their full name. So that means that it'll be 2 words, and each word should be at least 2 characters. Okay, so that means we're going to have at least 2 characters, a space, and then at least 2 characters. So I'm going to say write a regex validation for a name input field to verify that a person in, let's say, user enters both first and last name, and each is at least 2 characters. Oh, that is wrong, of course. Excellent. Go ahead and shoot that off, and let's see. Yeah, boom. Okay, so this is the regex. So you can imagine the knowledge that you would have to have in order to write this from scratch. Again, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm sure there are people that can do it. I just feel that it's kind of slight waste of mental space to know how to do that. So I'm going to go and copy the code. And obviously this needs to be tested because often ChatGPT would get this stuff wrong. So you have to test it out, make sure it's working like you expect. And if it's not, then you can alter your question. Maybe this needs to be clarified. So let's go ahead and give it a spin. I'm going to add the pattern validation, and you could just go ahead and paste the regex in there like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and publish. And I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to try and submit. Okay, so now it is throwing an error message. It's saying, please fill out this field. What you'll see that it's not saying, okay, so this is the inline. And if I was to change it here to tooltip, okay, and go ahead and hit publish, then go ahead and refresh there, submit. Okay, tooltip isn't working. Let's see if I just test. See, no, no tooltip. Okay, very sad. Um, yeah, in general, I think inline is considered best practice, even though I've seen some problems with it in Editor X, where it kind of collapsed the field when it was inline. So that's just something to, a small note for those of you who are using Editor X. So I'm going to go ahead and publish back into the inline one. And let's refresh. And I want to see what happens if so we see here, if I don't fill anything out, it says, please fill out this field. But if I add, let's say, Bob here, and then submit, please match the requested format. So yeah, so basically what this message is assuming is that you told people what you want. So let's say I said full name, first and last. Okay, so like just to indicate people want to put both their first and last name. So these are principles that are important. And we're going to talk more about it for just creating a form that is more user-friendly and just you want to make it as easy as possible to fill out forms because forms are so annoying. Even the shortest of forms can be super annoying. So you really want to give the person filling out the form all the possible tools to get it right and really just have a very smooth experience. So that's basically how to submit a custom form using no code, just using it. And now we're going to go and talk about the next level, which would be to submit using a data set, but with code. Okay, so there's three levels. One would be to submit just kind of plain with a data set, no intermediary. So it is easiest, but you kind of lose a little level of control. And we're going to talk about, now we're going to talk about submission using the data set and Velo Code. Okay, so now we're hopping into our Velo IDE over here on the bottom. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see what's going on here. And we're going to be using the API for the data set, and you can see some of the event handlers over here. But if we go to the documentation under dataset, you'll see there is a long list of things that we can do with a dataset using Velo Code. And the primary tool that we are going to be using is the save. Okay, so save is what would do the action of storing the data in the database when the button is clicked. So that's pretty much that link that we had between the submit and the data set. And in order to get this done, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to disconnect this submit button here so we don't have any wires crossing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say not connected. So the submit button is not connected to the form data anymore. We still have these messages, which we're going to use. And this could be done in a hybrid way. Okay, so we could have these fields connected using this kind of squiggly connected data button and submit using code. Okay, so that's one option that we can do. We can also set the fields themselves using code in the data set. Okay, so I can go and use this set field values to set the values, and I'll show you how to do that soon. But let's go ahead and start with just using save. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to submit button. Okay, this is the ID for the button. And while I'm here, I'm just going to give names to my success message as well. So I'm going to say success message. And I'm going to call this error message. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some Velo code. I'm going to select my submit button. And I'm going to say on click. We're going to run a function called submit. Okay. And now I'm going to write out this function right over here. So I'm going to say function submit. And what this function is going to do is it's going to select the database. So I'm going to say, we're going to give a name to our data set as well. So let's call this form data set. And form data set dot save. Okay. And that will do the same action of submitting to the database. Let me just double check here in the documentation, save, and here. Okay, so one thing that you want to note is that data sets need all these data set actions. So let me zoom in here as well. I don't know if you can really see what's going on here. Code. Yeah, so all of these data set actions need to happen when the data set is ready. So we know that we have on ready for a page, but we also have something that's called on ready for the data set. And that means that this data set has completely loaded and is either displaying the data that should be displaying or it's ready to receive data that would be saved in this example. And the way to verify that you're saving or doing any kind of action, any of these actions on a data set when it's ready is to use this data set on ready method. So if we wanted to be like 100% sure that we're doing this right, we would go here and kind of select the data set. So form data set dot on ready. And then inside of the callback function, we would have this save. So that is kind of a protection, so that if somebody, let's say, somehow managed to fill out this entire form and then click submit before the data set was ready, what would happen would be is that this data set would wait until it's ready and then it would save. Again, this is less the case usually for this kind of situation because it'll take people time to fill out the form, and the chances that the data set won't be ready by the time somebody is saving the form are real, like it's almost impossible. And that's why here in this example, they even say, let me go back to save here. So we have save current item, which is just save. And here they said save current item when page loads. So if you want to save something the second the page loads, so not a form, some other situation where you're saving data, then you're going to want to use that on ready because you're doing that really as soon as somebody loads the page and there's a slight chance that the data set hasn't loaded. But in our situation, almost impossible. Then again, it can't really hurt to set it up like this because worst case scenario, the data set will just be ready and it'll save. And awesome. So that's for our submit. There's a few more things that we'll want to set up in order to kind of make sure that our form is operating like it was before. And this is also the advantage of using the data set as opposed to what we were doing before. So if I, for example, go ahead, let's set it up before the submit button. So I'm going to select our data set, form data set. Whoops. And I'm going to say dot on after save. Okay, so this is an event handler that will run after our data set is saved. And basically what we can do here is we can set up anything we want to happen after the save happens. And this, I'm pretty sure, will only run if the save is successful. So if we go here on after save, runs just after save. Let's see, after save handler. So we have the item before save, the item after save. So this will only run if there's a successful save to the database. And what we can do is, so first I'm going to write event, and I'm going to say console.log event, just so that I can show you what it looks like. And what I'm going to do here is on after save, I'm going to show our success message. So success message dot show, okay, because it's hidden by default. And this won't work now. Oh, this is still connected to data. So I'm going to disconnect this. I'm actually going to disconnect this from the data, disconnect this from the data. Yeah, because I want to set this up all myself. No. Okay. Let's see. Still shows it's connected. Sus. Because it says not connected here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add two of my own text because I just don't want this to get mixed up. I don't want there to be I want this to be controlled completely by my code. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to add this success message. Success message. And let's center that. Awesome. And I'm going to duplicate that. And we're going to have the error message. You could put them one on top of the other. I'm just going to put them one under the other just so it's a little easier to edit them. And this is just the way that I like to indicate that this is not the actual text that'll be displayed there, but I'm going to be displaying something using data or code. And I'm going to go here and click text. And let's just change this to a nice red color. Awesome. And we need to just set up our names again. So this is going to be success message, and this is going to be error message. Awesome. And now we're going to have here So we're going to set our success message using code. So I'm going to say success message.text. And here we can really take advantage of the fact that we are using code. So I can write a custom success message. So for example, I can write, thanks for submitting the form. And then here, what I can have is the person's name. So I can say const name equals to event dot. And here we need to go to the documentation, item after save dot full name. Okay, so, and then here I can just say name. So now hopefully if this works, then we will see the person's name after they submit the form, which is like a really nice acknowledgement that we kind of got their data. And it's very personalized and it's an awesome experience for the user. Again, it's not necessary, it might be a little overkill, but I'm just kind of highlighting the general advantage of using code as opposed to submitting directly through the database. Another thing that we're going to want to set up is the error situation. So I'm going to say on error. And here we can set up our error message. So I'm going to say, let's also console.log event, just so we can see what it looks like. And then I'm going to say error message dot text equals there was an error. And here I could probably also personalize it a bit. Let me take a look here just at what the errors might be. Error handler. Okay, so we have here, you'll see that we have operation, error, error code, and error message. So let's say we want to also display this error message for the person that's experiencing the error. So I just, because when they see a message, that might give them an indication of what went wrong. And that way, you know, it can help them do the right thing or contact us if they need to contact us or whatever it is. So I can go here and say const error message equals to event dot here error dot message. This time string. Why does it think this parameter is a string? Uh, so this callback actually takes two parameters. So one is the operation. So let's see. Operation probably the same as the function that caused the error. For example, operation any of the following saved next previous. Okay, so this is, I guess if you want to set up different error handlers for different operations. So the operation that we're doing here is save. Just gonna go here and save. Silent comma is unused. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, I see. Okay, sorry. Stupid of me. So this is not something that we're passing in. I got confused for a second. It's, by the way, it's 6:30 now, which means I started this video at about 5:50 a.m. So you'll have to excuse any kind of oversights. Yeah, so basically this is not a parameter. When you pass an argument, this is like a parameter that we can tap into and understand which operation the error occurred on, not to determine which kind of operation this error callback should fire on, because that would make no sense at all. So basically, if I was to log that, so operation and event, no, sorry, let's say, well, we'll see it here in the event when we log it anyways. So we have event, and then we have, okay, so we don't have event.error. This is just going to be the error. And then this will be error, and this will be, does not exist on type. What is it called? Yeah, you can tell that this is not the usual way that I do this. So I usually will use the third method that I'm going to show you, which is to use pure Velo code without a data set at all. Just message, so not error message. Yeah, and that actually makes a lot of sense because it's a good place to give a little anecdote about naming things. So generally, if you have like an object and then you have different properties in the object, it's not best practice um, to include the name of the object or like the higher level of the object inside of the properties, which is like the sub-level. So it's not best practice to have error and then dot error message, because if you have error and then you'll have dot message, it's clear that this message belongs to the error. Let me try and give you another example. So if I have an object called, car, and here I have different properties of the car, and I won't have the, car, door, and then car, wheels. I would want to just call this door and wheels, door, wheels. Anyway, because naming is important, and this was a good example of the fact that Wix did decent naming here. So yeah, error.message, and then this we can change for operation and error. Awesome, and then here there was an error, and then I can actually just add in, change this to a template literal, and I'll just add in here the error message. Cool. Okay, so this should be enough, I think, for basic setup. So I'm going to go ahead and publish. And I'm going to refresh here. So let's see what happens if I just click submit. Okay, so an error occurred. Please try again. I feel like this is not showing the most updated version of my site. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh here. Okay, now it is definitely, because you can see here that I made a mistake and I didn't hide the new success and error message. So let's do that. Hidden, hidden, publish, and refresh, and refresh. Excellent. So now we're using the most updated version of the site. And I'm going to go ahead and click submit. And you can see here now that there's no error message showing here on the bottom because we didn't even pass the validation stage. So yeah, so if there's a problem with the initial validation, then you won't get our error message on the bottom because that error is only very specific to when you when we are actually submitting the data to the database, which happens after validations are run and are successful. So if we still want to show an error message here on the bottom, we would have to set that up in a custom way. So like when this validation fails. Okay, so that would be here for our each individual input. We would have to check, we'd have to write some kind of custom validation, write some custom validation function, and then check the validity, okay, of this object. This is not that valid, okay? But we'll talk about that soon when we get to the last stage. And there are probably different ways to approach this, so just don't assume that the way that I'm showing you is the only way or even the best way, but I'm going to share what I got. So Yeah, so that's for that. And an error submitting to the database. So let me go ahead and I'm going to actually make these both. I'm going to change this from being required to required, and this one as well will not be required. Okay, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go to the database, and now in newer Wix websites, I don't know if your site has this feature on it. It may or may not, but anyways, this is just for the purpose of demonstrations. We can add validations. Okay, so I can add a validation to a field. For example, for the edit field, sorry, not for the edit field, for let's say the email field. So I can go to validations, I can make this a required field. Okay, and this is a validation that happens. I could also set a default value. This is a validation that happens at the dataset level. So this should throw an error if we're trying to submit the dataset and this field is missing. Okay, just because I want to show you what it'll look like if we have a submission error. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to refresh the site. Wait, did I publish? Let's publish. And refresh, and refresh, just to make sure. So if I go here and I add just my name, so Bob, and then I'm going to go ahead and click submit. Okay, so I need to require Dylan, and go ahead and click submit. And this is still required, so I guess this is not the most updated version. Let's try again, Bob, Dylan, and weird. We did expect that to throw an error. Hmm. Okay, let's see. Full name Bob Dylan. An error occurred in one of the after save callbacks. Cannot read the properties of undefined reading full name. Okay, so I see there's an object logged here. Okay. So the same mistake that I made with the error, I actually realized that I made it now with the original after save. So if I go here, and yeah, so here you can see on after save, I wrote here event out of habit, because usually a callback function will, for like an event listener, so that will have an event. But if we actually read the documentation on after save, then you'll see here, and it's a little confusing because they don't put it here in the demonstration, but basically, this after save handler parameters is the item before being saved and after being saved. So instead of event, what we need to have here is item before save, item after save, and then we could just have item after save and item after save. So I think what was happening, it was just logging the item before save in the console as the event. I think that's what happened. Okay, let's try that again. I'm going to go ahead and publish. And let's refresh. And refresh. And refresh again. Okay, let's see. Bob, Dylan, and I'm going to go ahead and click submit. Okay, thanks for submitting the form, Bob Dylan. Yeah, so What might be happening is that this field might just be submitting an empty string to the database. Yeah, that's weird. I would expect this validation. What is this? Required field is empty. Oh, hmm. Okay, so it is showing that it's empty and it should. Okay, this is a pretty new feature of the validation, to be honest. Maybe I shouldn't use things for the first time in a video. But yeah, what I was expecting to happen is that this would throw an error when we were trying to submit with the data set. And let's see, because this might throw an error if we try and do this with Velo Code. So let's jump ahead and show you the third option, which is to directly submit to the database with Velo Code. Now what we're going to do is we're going to approach this whole thing just using Velo Code, and we're going to be using Wix Data in order to submit to the database. And the advantage of this approach is that it gives the most flexibility, and the downside would be that you have to do the most stuff yourself. So you don't have the dataset handling anything. And let me just go over the new setup. So you see here, the dataset is currently gone. And I've split up the full name into first name and last name. And I've added the titles for the labels for these fields, which can be done right over here. And I've also added in our custom success message and error message. This is just how I like to indicate that this is a message that'll be populated using code and not something. It won't say this exactly, it'll say whatever I tell it from the code. And you'll see I've also added a Lottie animation, which you can do from here. Add elements, Lottie, and you can go to lottiefiles.com, switch that up. I have a video about Lottie files as well, too, I think. And that's just what I kind of like to use for a loader. And now we're going to set this form up using Velo. So we're going to start out just coding as we go, and then later we'll do some refactoring, and I'll talk about a project that we're working on in terms of kind of streamlining how these kinds of custom forms are created. So let's hop into our code. And we have our empty on ready function here. I cleared out all of our previous code, and I'm going to zoom back in. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add an event listener for our button. So I'm going to select our button. So that is the submit button. Let me move this up a bit so you can see better. And we're going to say dot on click. And we're going to have a function which will be our submit function. Let's write out that function now. So I'm going to make it an asynchronous function because we're going to be submitting to a database. So there's going to be some asynchronous action here. And we have function, and I'm going to call this submit. And at the moment, it's not going to take any parameters. And what we're going to do, so first thing is we're going to just get all of the values of these inputs. So I'm going to say const first name equals to, and then select the first name input dot value. And then I'm going to do the same for last name equals last name dot value, and the same for the email. So const email equals to email dot value. Okay, so we have the three values that we want to submit to the database. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn those into an object, which represents the item that we're going to save. I'm going to say const. We can call this several things. We can call this form submission. We can call this item to save. Let's go with form submission. Sounds appropriate. And that will be equal to an object. And you'll see here that since I named my variables based on the fields here in the form, so these are actually some new stuff. I mean, maybe a few months ago they added here that you can kind of see all the fields in the collection, and recently they also added the ID here for the collection itself and these handy kind of copy ID little things here. So just note that. And yeah, so we can see here that I named the variables the same names as the field. So full name, last name, first name. So this is actually quite convenient because that means that I just need to write it out like this. So first, uh, first, 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 what's going on? Name. There's something weird. Oh, am I outside of the, yeah. Okay, so this needs to be inside of the function. For a second, thought I was going crazy there. Okay, so this needs to be inside the function. First name, last name, email. Okay, and I could just do it like this, and this will submit to the database. And this is the equivalent of email, email. Okay, so let's say I had named this variable the email, then this would have to be written like this, the email. Okay, and this would be the email field, but since I conveniently named them the same as the fields, then saves me some time. And now we're going to save this using Wix Data. So I'm going to go ahead and import Wix Data. And I'm assuming that you have some basic knowledge of how to use these APIs. I have videos about this as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a try catch. Oops. And this is a way to catch errors from asynchronous actions, or basically whenever you're waiting for a promise. And here we're going to say const saved form is equal to, say, saved submission. That makes more sense. Equals to await Wix data dot save. And here you can either use save or you could use insert. Essentially, it'll do the same thing here because we're assuming that this is a form that's only submitted once by each person and each submission is new. And we're not passing in the ID of the item, so save would work the same as insert. I'm just going to use save here because terminology-wise, it just clicks with me a little more. And then I'm going to have here form, which is the ID of our collection. And we're going to have the saved submission. Save, no, sorry, form submission. My bad. So this is what we're submitting to the database. Okay, and then what we can do is we could say console.log saved submission just for this development stage so we could see what we submitted. And what we can do is we can create a success message. So success message dot text will be equal to your form has been submitted. And we're going to show that success message. And this is also where you could, if you wanted to navigate somewhere else, you could also do like set timeout and then do, Wix location .to, and then navigate somewhere else if you wanted to. We're not going to do that at the moment for this form. And then we have an error situation. So we're going to log the error again for development. And we're going to have a similar situation that we have here with the success message. So error message and error message. And here what we can do is we can either just write there was an issue submitting, please try again. Okay, or we can really convey this specific error that we got to the user. Sometimes this becomes a little complex because the error codes that come back here can be kind of unclear or just misleading to your typical user. So this is really on a per your use case. You can decide what you want to do there. Okay, so that is the basics of submitting the form. One more thing that we're going to want to have is our loader. Okay, so the loader is basically something that indicates that we're processing the data and that you need to wait to continue, wait for something to happen, and then don't just keep on clicking submit. Otherwise, if somebody clicks submit, then they might think, oh, is my form submitting or not? And depending on kind of what you're doing to process this data and submit it to the database, it could be that this will take a few seconds, especially if this is data that, let's say, you're maybe processing through a third-party API or something like that. So here we're going to do two things. So right when we submit, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the submit button and we're going to disable it. Okay, and this will prevent people from clicking this button again and again and again while we're processing their data. And the second thing, we're going to open up that loader dot show. Okay, and then what we can do at the end, okay, so at the very end, what we're going to do is we can do finally, and then, so this is what's going to happen no matter what. So this will happen if everything is successful. This will happen if there's an error, and this will happen in every single case. So what we can do is we can turn off the loader dot enable dot hide, and we can also enable the button because let's say if there was some kind of error, then we'll want to let people submit again. So actually enabling the button, we could only enable the button in the situation where there was an error. So that could be actually better practice than doing it in finally. So here what we can do is show the error button and then enable dot enable. Yeah, so I think that would be best practice. Again, there might be certain use cases where you might want to let people submit the same form multiple times. I don't know what your use case is. But okay, this overall looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish this. Okay, so here I am on the live site and we have our new form here and I'm going to try filling it out. So I'm just going to fill out Bob, Dylan, Babo at gmail.com and go ahead and click submit. And we don't even need to go look at the collection because here I can already see that this is our saved submission and you see all the fields here and also the additional system fields that Wix puts in whenever you submit something. And first of all, so one thing that we're noticing that has to do with best practices of creating custom forms is that the values are still inside of my input. So even though we submitted, we still have the original values in here, and that's not so great, okay? Because that kind of looks weird to the user, and if it's a form that needs to be submitted multiple times, then that'll be a problem for the user. So our best practice, number one, we want to clear these. Values whenever we submit the form. The next thing that I want to talk about is validation. And if we take a look here, so I just refreshed and we're taking a look at the same form. And if I go ahead and I click submit, you'll see that your form has been submitted. Okay, and that is even though these two fields are required. Okay, these two fields are marked as required. I'll go over here and I'll show you. Settings and required. Okay, so why did it still submit? Because our code doesn't know that this is a form. Okay, it's not like submitting through a data set where there are some built-in validations that can work with Wix. Here, our code doesn't know that we need to validate this, and we only are submitting to the data set when this is valid. There's no such condition in our code. So we're going to need to deal with validation customly by ourselves. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a new function. I'm going to call function validate. Okay, and what this function is going to do is to make sure that all of our fields are valid and return an answer to our submit function if true or false, depending on the validity of all the fields. So I'm going to say let valid, and then I'm going to find the validity of each of our fields. So I'm going to say const first name is valid. And again, I know this code is a little repetitive. So in our final state it probably won't look exactly like this, but just to understand conceptually what we're doing, I think this is best. So we're going to select the first name field and say dot valid. Okay, so every Wix input has this value, okay, dot valid, and basically it checks to see if the conditions that we set for validity are valid. Okay, so if it's valid, then it'll return true, and if it is invalid, then it'll return false. Okay, so for example, this required field, if I haven't filled it in, then it'll be false. And same we can do for const last name is valid, and that would be the same thing here, just for last name. And then we can do the same thing for email. So const email is valid, and that will be equal to email. Excellent. Okay, and now we need to check is essentially if all three of these are valid or not. So I'm going to say valid equals first name is valid and last name is valid and email is valid. Okay, so what this basically will do is say, okay, is this valid? If it's true, move to the next one. If it's true, move to the next one. If one of these is false, valid will be false. If all of them are true, valid will be true. And then we can just return valid. Okay, so we can go over here. And now we can have this right over here in our function. And after we've disabled and showed the loader, what we could do is start our validation. Okay, so we can say const is valid equals to validate. And then we can say that if not is valid, okay, so if it comes back false, then we're just going to return. Okay, and we actually can't just return, okay, because what we're going to need to do is we are going to need to restore our form to a state where it can be submitted again. So that means we're going to need to submit button dot enable loader hide and return. Okay, exit the function. That way, none of the stuff over here is going to happen. Okay, so that's if our fields are not valid. And what we can do is also add an indication in the error message that some of our fields are invalid. Okay, so what we could do is we can add this as kind of an additional if statement here. Okay, so if not first name is valid, then we're going to want to display that in the error message. So what we could do is say let error message equal please fill out the following fields. And then we can have here, if not first name is valid, then we can take we can say, for example, error message plus equals space first name. Okay, and the same we can do for the other two. Again, the code is kind of repetitive, but just so you get an idea of what we're doing. So if last name is invalid, change this to last name, and the same for if not email is valid, then here we'll have email. Okay, and I'm going to change email here to required as well. Field title, required. Okay, and I'm going to make it inline error message format. Okay, so this is one way that we can approach it. And then we're going to want to show our, and then here we're going to say if not valid, error message dot text equals to error message, and we're going to show. Okay, so that's one thing we wanted to do, and we're going to keep on making improvements on this with each cycle that we kind of write out new code and do some testing. But one more thing that we said we wanted to do was to get rid of the values when we submit the form. So what we can do here is after here in the finally, after we have a successful submission, then what we're going to do is we're going to clear out all of the values. So we could just take these three and put them right over here and get rid of this and get rid of this and get rid of this format. And here we can say dot value and just clear. Okay, or I mean, this is really very dependent on the, so these are text inputs, so I can do this. Another thing I could just do is just pass in null or undefined, and that would be more generic, so for more different field types. Okay, so that's what we wanted to do. So let's just test out this first iteration of improvements that we've made to our form. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this, but before I publish, I just want to add back that versioning that we had before, which helped us out a lot. So I'm going to add that in. And this is going to be V1. And I'm just going to, this is not something that you need with your form. It's just something so I can tell what iteration of the site we're on. And here I'm going to refresh. Okay, so we're back in version 1. And now I'm going to go ahead and try and submit our form. Boom, our form did not submit. And we got the error message, please fill out the following fields, first name, last name, email. Okay, it's a little sloppy, there's no commas or anything, so that can be fixed, but that's what we have here. And if I fill out, let's say just here, John, and I submit, then you'll see here that that field kind of disappears from the input here. And if I add Watson, submit, okay, just email. And if I have everything, then it will actually, form will actually submit. So I can do here, John W. I did Josh, John W at gmail.com, and go ahead and click submit. And okay, so the form was submitted. So you'll see here that because we put null for each of these, so it throws like a, it throws an error as if this field is not filled out. Okay, so that's one thing that you should notice that we need to fix. The second thing is that we didn't clear our error message when we submitted the form. Okay, so that's something that we're going to want to do. And the third thing is that we didn't see these validity indicators when we had any kind of error with the validity. So we did see it here on the bottom, but we didn't see it over here. Okay, so that's something that we're going to want to add in. So what we can do here is, let's go back to our editor. So let's first deal with the error message. So we're going to want to, basically every time we submit the form, we're going to want to clear out the error message. So I'm going to say error message dot hide every time we submit. Okay. You can also do it if you want every time you change a field. So if you see the person started to change the form, then you can get rid of the error message. That's really, it's up to you. It depends on the situation, because our error message kind of gave a nice list of everything that's missing, and then if you make that disappear, maybe it'll be harder for them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add back in the indicators, and the way that we're going to do that is that we're going to here in our validate function. So except for just this, if it's not valid, what we're going to do is we are going to fire off the validity indicator. So dot validity date validity indication. Okay. And basically what this does is it checks to see the validity, and if it's invalid, then it'll kind of fire off that validity. You have a problem. Okay. And this is technically this is asynchronous. I'm going to leave it without await for now and see if everything is working. But in production, this should be here with await and async. Okay, and that would affect the, you know what, let's do it. Why not? So that would be here as well. Turn this into something that needs to be waited, because this all will end up being a promise. Okay, and we're going to do this for all three of these. And we're going to do like that. Okay, update validity indication. And obviously we want to do it for each individual input. Okay, so that's one thing that we said we were going to fix. Another thing that I want to add in, which I think will be cool and I think is also best practice, is to scroll up to any fields that need to be filled out. Okay, so if somebody misses a field, imagine like a very long form, and there's a field all the way on top that's missing, so you don't want to just leave them on the bottom of the page when they submit. You want to bring them back up and say, oh, right here, this is what you're missing. So let's also add that in. So I'm going to just get this, and I'm going to add dot scroll to. Okay, so I'm going to just put that right over here for all of them. This might also be a promise, by the way. Let's check, read more. Picking up documentation. Scroll to, promise. Okay. And add await before all of these as well. And again, there's nothing that's really happening here in the function after this, so it shouldn't have a lot of implication, but it's just always good to know what's a promise and what's not. Technically, also, all of these shows, those are all promises. Enable is a promise, show is a promise, hide is a promise. Sometimes I get lazy and I don't do it, but best practice would be to really have these all as promises. Because otherwise, like, let's take this situation. So this technically means that this line of code could end up running before this line of code, because here we're still waiting to resolve the promise and we could just move on to the next line. But here we make sure that everything will happen sequentially. And then we can do this for here as well. And we're good because we're already in an asynchronous function over here. I'm just cleaning up that part of the code. And we are adding in all of our scroll to. Here we have first name, email, and here we have last name. Great. Okay, so that's also very good. And I'm trying to remember now what else I said I wanted to fix. So we fixed the validity indicators. We fixed this disappearing. For now, I'm not going to add the on change. And one more thing that I want to do is I want to reset the validity indicators after we submit the form so that it's not all red. Okay, because I want them to be empty, but I don't want them to be red because I don't want the person to think that there's a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right over here. So after we set these all to null, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the validity indicators for each one as well. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say reset validity indication. And if I'm not mistaken, that should turn it. Let me just read the docs, make sure. Visual cue resets the validity indication. Actual validity is not affected. I think it turns it off. I'm pretty sure, 99% sure. So let's add that over here and here and here. And again, there's lots of repetition going on here, and we'll talk about how we can possibly improve this. I'm gonna go in here, await, and await, and await. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm gonna just update this to version 2. And I'm going to publish. Excellent. And let's go to these docs, go back to our live site, refresh, refresh until I get version 2. Publish, published. Because Wix is being a bit slow with propagation today. We did publish, right? Let's just make sure. I'll publish it again. And refresh. Version 2. Excellent. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill out the form. So let's say I forgot to do something that I wanted to do. 1 second. Basically, I wanted to take this submit button down here. Okay, just to like show you a situation where it's kind of like a big form, just so we can see the scroll up effect. I'm gonna refresh that. Okay, so our submit button is all the way down there. So let's say, I'm filling out the form, filling it out, and I click submit. Boom, it scrolls me up. Okay, so here actually it scrolled me up first to the first name and last name, but then it scrolled me to the email. So you'll kind of want to think about that and do it in reverse order so that you scroll last to the topmost input. Okay, because otherwise you saw what happened. It was kind of reversed there. So that's something we would want to fix. And you can see that these also fired off. Okay, so that's good. And now let's actually fill out our form. So we have here John Watson aw@gmail.com, and go ahead and click submit. So you see our error disappeared and our fields are empty and they're nice and clean. Okay, they're not flashing red, so I don't think, oh no, what's wrong? Okay, so that's pretty much the basics of best practices for creating a custom form. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do once you're creating a custom form. You could be handling, all of this submission in the back end if you want to do something a little more secure. You can do things like adding in data hooks. Okay, add or remove hooks, which basically allows you to manipulate the data before actually submitting it. So I can combine, let's say, first name and last name into full name. But I just want to talk about, for a second, refactoring the code over here. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take some of the repetitive code and turn it into functions. So let's create another function here on the bottom for show error message. And we'll create another similar function for show success message. And these will take messages. And these are also going to be asynchronous. Okay. And like we can take this, for example, and put it right over here. And this will be message. Okay. And here, instead of that, we'll have here show error message. Await. Okay, so we're kind of chopping down those lines of code. And let's take this as well. So this can be, and I can add here, for example, also the submit button dot enable. Okay, submit button enable. And this also helps like not forget certain things that we definitely want to do every time that we want to show an error message. So if I was writing out each line, then I could forget sometimes to show the submit button, let's say. But now we know, okay, this is a standard SOP. This is something that happens every time we show the error message. So I can go ahead and I can switch that out here as well. But I'm going to want to put in the error message. So I'm going to go await, show error message. And what we can do is also add like a generic message. So I can say here equals message, or there was an error. Okay, that way if for some reason I forget to pass in message or I deliberately don't pass in a message, then it'll show that, okay? So here, for example, I had forgotten, so it would show this. Okay, but here what we actually wanted to show was the error message. Cool. So that's the errors. And then we can also do that for the success messages. So just have here await, show success message. We'll pass in this. And then we'll just take this and move it out into another function. And this will be message, and we'll have this as a default, let's say. Okay, so that's some good refactoring that we have there. Let's talk about some of the other stuff that we can do. Okay, so if, let's say if is not valid here. So here we actually don't need this anymore, okay, because it's gonna throw, because we're showing an error message. Are we showing the error message? Yeah, if not valid, show error message. Okay, so we're doing that over here. And what we can do also is take this loader.hide and bring it right over here. Okay, loader.hide. And if we have a success message, then we can also have loader.hide, and that gets rid of any need to deal with the loader again. So this we can kind of just turn into that. And here again, we can get rid of this finally because we already built that into the show error message and so success message functions. The next thing we can do is we can try and refactor, let's say, some of this validity code. Okay, so we have here code that's kind of repeating itself. And the way I'm going to approach this is by turning, let's first extract our input elements into an array. So I'm going to say const input elements. And I'm going to just have these all in an array. So I'm going to have an array and just have this in there, this one, and this one. Okay, and now we can start playing around with this array and building it out. So for example, for the form submission, or what I could also do, and this really depends on how you named your inputs as well. So it depends, yeah, it really depends on how you named your inputs. I'm just trying to think if I want to show you something very specific to our scenario or something more generic. I'm going to go with more generic. So I'm going to assume that you didn't name your inputs like that. So here we have the input elements. This we're going to leave as is. And what we could do here is we can, so here there's two ways you can do this actually. So you could use this array. So I can say input elements dot for each. And then I can have here element. And I can say element dot value equals null. And then await, this needs to be asynchronous, await element dot reset validity indication. Okay, so that is one approach. Another, and then we can get rid of all of this. Okay, another approach is that Wix kind of has built in this kind of, you can actually select multiple elements at a time. So we could have done something like this. Input, sorry, so this would be first, sorry, first name, and then here, sorry, like this, last name, etc. dot value equals null. I'll tell you why I'm not such a huge fan of this. So one, you notice that the telesense disappears. Okay, so like as I'm typing, I'm not sure if I'm typing the correct selectors. So the whole system of like the IDE detecting errors and letting you know doesn't really work. So that's one issue. The second issue is I find it a little less scalable. So here kind of I have an array and I kind of just add another element here and have this work for all the code that's using this input elements array, whereas this is like very local. Okay. And it's a little less flexible to work with. So I'm choosing this method, but just so you know, that technically would have also been an option. Okay, so we really made this code a lot more efficient over here. And another one thing that I'm going to refactor, and again, it could be we could make this even more efficient, extract another function out of these two, which have some repetitive stuff. But eventually you have to just stop and decide that the tutorial is over. No, that your code is like clean enough and it's working and you're moving on to another project and you'll revisit it and try and refactor it again later. So here what we could do is all this is pretty much repetitive. So what we could do is we can say input elements dot for each, and we can have your element, and then we can say okay, so here we're gonna actually I'm gonna include this part actually in our refactoring. So what we can do is we can say, let's do it like this. I'm trying to think of the best approach. Okay, so I'm gonna change the general approach of this validity here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say for each element. So I'm gonna say um, valid equals to valid and element 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 not valid. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is I'm saying take this valid and I'm going to start it off as true. And then if this valid is true, let's say, so it'll be true and whatever this is. So if this is false, then this valid will turn into false. If this is true, then it'll remain true. And basically what this will do is that if at any point we hit something that's false, the end will return valid equals false. And if all this goes successfully, then this will remain true and will pass in true. Okay, so it's a slightly more complex approach. I hope I'm not overcomplicating it. And then we can have here error message equals to, and here we need to get creative because here I kind of just wrote the text out like this. So what we could do here is we can actually say that it'll be equal to the element dot label. Okay, and that should be this. Okay, so first name label. Okay, email, first name, last name. Another technical approach could be element.id, but the label will usually be like a more nicely formatted indicator of what that element is. If that's not the case, I don't know, you're using a form, let's say, without labels or something like that, you can also just make a more complex input elements array and kind of add some more metadata inside. But that's just a little more complex. Awesome. So we dealt with this line, and then we just need to deal with these two lines. So we have here await, and this needs to be asynchronous. Await, and then we have here element dot update validity indicator indication, and we have await element dot what should I do here? Scroll to. I forgot for a second. Okay, scroll to. Awesome, and then that should technically deal with all of this. I'm going to comment it out. Just and even this we don't need anymore. Okay, so all this is gone. Okay. And I usually like to just comment out first, make sure it's working before I go ahead and delete all the code. Um, okay, so we did some refactoring. Let's go ahead and publish. Oh, whoops, I didn't change the version. I'm going to bring my submit button back up here and change this to version 3. And so what I'm going to do here actually is here in the validation, I'm going to deal with that issue that we had with the scroll up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse this array of input elements. So the assumption here is that input elements is in the order that they are in the form. Okay, so that's an assumption that I have in here. And then when I'm running the validations, I'll reverse it. So I'll start by validating the bottommost fields and work my way up. And that way, if one of the topmost fields is invalid, then we'll scroll to it and not to one of the lower fields. So let's go ahead and publish that. And let's refresh. Version 3, awesome. So let's try submit. Boom. Okay, so didn't submit. And here we have first name. Okay, awesome. So we have our first bug in the new validation. Let's just make sure that the regular submit works. So I'm just going to do jw at gmail.com and go ahead and click submit. Form has been submitted. Okay, so everything else is working. Let's just fix that because here I basically set the error message to that instead of plus equals element.label. And let's also do it like this. So I'm going to do there's like 3 levels of fanciness I can go to here when I'm doing this. I'm going to go for level 2. So basically, I'm going to add a space and I'm going to add a comma. So this is like decently fancy, but it'll still have that small little issue of putting a comma for the last one. Okay, this could be fixed, but it's outside the scope of this tutorial. And I'm going to go ahead and v4 that, publish, and v4 submit, email, last name, first name. Okay, so that is going to be all for today. In terms of building out custom forms. Let me just recap what we did. While I'm doing my recap, you can go ahead and you can like the video. If you really like the video and you want to see more like these, you can go and subscribe to the channel. I usually have 1 or 2 videos a week, all stuff that's Wix on the boundary of just general code, a bunch of AI videos. So if you're interested in all those fields, definitely I would recommend hitting the subscribe button. You can also comment if you have any questions or you want to share your experience working with custom forms. And let me just recap what we did today. So we talked about 3 different approaches to building custom forms. One was using a data set, and the others were using a data set in a combination with Velo Code. Okay, so using the Wix Dataset API. And the third approach was the one we just did, which was to do everything completely using code and submitting using Wix Data, which allows the most flexibility. And yeah, so I'm working actually now on a project to create a kind of package. And this package will streamline this process basically. So take a lot of the standard things that you'll pretty much want to do for any form, which is the stuff that we talked about here today, and take those stuff and just let you, use one class, use your inputs, use your messages, and boom, create the form. Everything will be customizable, of course. And yeah, so I'm working on that as a project. If that interests you, you can let me know in the comments, and hopefully we'll share a video when that project is ready and allow people to uh, gain access to that package, either download it from our new site, the wixwiz.com, or maybe even we'll release it as a block. We'll see. So yeah, looking forward to hearing your comments. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.